I have learned that there are moments when a life tilts quietly, not with catastrophe, but with a softness that rearranges everything we think we know. You're washing a cup at the sink or staring at the glow of the phone in a dark room, and suddenly, the surface of things no longer explains your own heart to you. Something deeper knocks from the inside. Something wordless asks to be named. That is where the story begins, in the hush between what we perform and what we are, in the strange gravity that draws two people together and then, just as mysteriously, lets one of them go. I used to believe love was a practice of effort, the right words, the attentive gestures, the careful remembering of favorite flowers, and the delight of surprise. I believed in calendars and compatibility, in mutual dreams pinned neatly to the future. And then there were the weeks when everything seemed to click, the air bright with ease, the private jokes, the electric glance from across a crowded room. If the world were only surface, those weeks would have been enough. But love is older than our calendars and deeper than our reasons. It moves under thought like groundwater, moves under earth slow, patient, unseen. That is why, even in seasons of closeness, I would sometimes feel a distance unfurl between us, not as rejection, not as blame, but as a current pulling him somewhere I could not go. He would stay at least in the ordinary ways present at dinner, there in the photographs, and yet a window had opened in him to a place I did not recognize. I mistook this once as a failure. Later, I came to see it as an invitation. There is a language beneath language, an old alphabet the soul reads by instinct. Jung called part of it archetype, the ancestral patterns behind our faces, the inner images that outlive our biographies. You meet someone, and a bell you did not know you carried rings. He looks at you and sees not only your eyes and your posture and the particular way you laugh, he sees a symbol he has been seeking without knowing he was seeking it. He is startled by his own recognition. He doesn't fall in love with your resume or your patience or your admirable restraint with coffee and sugar. He falls into the hollow where his own unintegrated life has been waiting, and for a while, your presence is the bridge across that unseen ravine. You are not doing anything unusual. In fact, you are most magnetic when you surrender the performance and simply inhabit yourself. The scent of unscriptedness is irresistible to a part of the psyche that has been starved of truth. If I speak about he, I am also speaking about we. Every one of us is both seeker and symbol, mirror and wanderer. The most haunting connections of our lives are rarely the ones we try to manufacture. They are the strange arrivals, the moments of quiet astonishment when another person's presence folds the map in our hands and turns the compass toward an inner north. If the body is a home, that presence opens a long locked room. If the heart is a church, that presence lights an old candle whose smoke smells like memory. We mistake the person for the cause, and for a while this works. How could it not? Their voice becomes the door, their skin the threshold. But doors were always built for passage. What calls us is the country on the other side. This is why some men pull away just when they begin to feel something real, not because the feeling is false, but because the realness unfastens a deeper door. Control trembles. The old image of the self, the one who is strong, indispensable, unshaken, starts to crack the way ice cracks when spring leans in with its warmth. He doesn't know that what he's fleeing isn't you, but the shaking of his own foundations. He retreats to the familiar where the furniture is arranged just so, where desire can be managed by distance and the ego can return to its habitual throne. You are left with the ache of absence and the temptation to do more, to prove, to please, to ask what you did wrong. But here's the secret the soul is always trying to tell us: the more you grip, the more the symbol you had become dissolves back into a surface. The archetype recedes, the mirror fogs, the river withdraws into stone. You remain unforgettable not when you strive, but when you refuse to betray yourself. The quiet that follows self-honoring has its own resonance, like a bell after it is struck. Paradoxically, Your willingness to step back from the stage, to let him meet the thing your presence awakened without making yourself the solution, is precisely the act that deepens the impression. You are not a cure, you are a call. And calls, when they are true, do not demand. They wait at the edge of the forest while the one who heard them decides whether to enter. I have seen how the mind tries to bargain with mystery. We replay the late-night conversations, the meals, the sudden laughter that felt like a secret language, believing that if we can hold the thread of memory long enough, we might follow it back to whatever door first opened. But the thread was never attached to the other person. It was tied all along to a hidden place inside the self, a place warmed by their nearness but belonging to you. Here, in this recognition, disappointment turns gently into reverence. What left your life was not the possibility of love. What arrived was the possibility of becoming more fully yourself. And the task tender, terrible, luminous is to stay with the invitation. There's a strange stillness that follows when a story you were certain of suddenly collapses. The phone no longer rings at the same hour. The chair across from you stays empty. At first, the silence feels like punishment, as if the universe has withdrawn its attention. But over time, you begin to sense that this emptiness is not absence, it's space, a widening, a soft clearing where something new can emerge. This is the moment the ego tries hardest to fill the void. It looks for answers, for substitutes, for someone new to pour meaning into. Yet the soul, quiet and steady, whispers something else, stay here. Don't run from the ache. It's where the truth is hiding. Jung wrote that what we repress becomes our destiny. For years, I didn't understand what that meant. I thought repression referred only to trauma, to the dark corners we avoid. But I've learned that we also repress our radiance, our wildness, our ease. We repress our authenticity in the hope that someone will love us for being pleasing. We trade the roar of our spirit for the applause of acceptance. And each time we do, something sacred grows dim. Love that begins from that dimness burns bright for a while. But it is a borrowed flame. It consumes what little air is left until both lovers are gasping in a room of smoke. The connection fades not because there was no love, but because the mystery that nourished it has been domesticated, tamed into habit and fear. Men often fall for what they cannot define, not because they crave confusion, but because something in that indefinable quality mirrors the parts of themselves still waiting to be found. When a woman stands in her truth quiet, unbending, alive, she reflects to him the unclaimed freedom within his own soul. It's not her perfection that stirs him, it's her wholeness. It's the way she can belong to herself without apology. Her energy tells him, I am not here to complete you. I am here to remind you of your own completion. And though he may not understand it consciously, something in him responds with both wonder and terror. That terror is ancient. It comes from generations of conditioning that taught men love must be conquered, not surrendered to. That strength means control, and vulnerability means defeat. So when he meets a woman who cannot be controlled, who smiles with calm certainty and meets his gaze as an equal, his entire inner framework trembles. She becomes both magnet and mirror. He can't look away, but he also can't look too long without seeing what he's avoided: the tenderness, the longing, the boy inside the man who still aches to be seen without armor. And so he oscillates one step forward, one step back, caught between desire and fear, between the pull of awakening and the comfort of sleep. If you've ever been that woman, you know the confusion that follows. He seems drawn to you one moment and distant the next. His eyes say everything his words can't. Then suddenly his silence fills the room like fog. You start questioning your worth, trying to decode his moods, but beneath the surface, something deeper is unfolding. His retreat is not always rejection. Sometimes it's a desperate attempt to preserve the identity that your presence threatens to unravel. He doesn't yet realize that what he's running from isn't you, it's himself. And that's why, months or years later, He might remember you in fragments, a scent, a song, a half-dreamed vision that won't let him go. Because you weren't just a person in his story. You were the mirror he once glimpsed his own soul in. The human heart doesn't forget the moment it first recognized itself. That recognition is rare, and it carries both beauty and weight. When a man loses a woman who reflected his deeper truth, he doesn't just lose her companionship. He loses access to the part of himself she illuminated. It's like walking away from a window that once showed him a sunrise he didn't know existed. For a while, he might chase that light in other faces, other bodies, other distractions. But what he's really seeking is that forgotten version of himself, the one that only appeared in her presence. And because the psyche is poetic in its cruelty, it sends him echoes instead of answers. He dreams of her, though he can't explain why. He hears her laugh in places where no one stands. Her image lingers not because she was flawless, but because she touched something that words could never reach. For the woman, this is where the lesson deepens. There comes a time when you must release the need to be understood. You begin to realize that being unforgettable is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. You cannot force someone to face their soul before they're ready. You cannot make them stay in a room they fear. Your task is to remain faithful to your own essence, even if that means walking away. There is a quiet kind of dignity in choosing yourself without bitterness, in closing the door without slamming it. That gesture, gentle, final, full of grace, often leaves the deepest mark, because love born from truth never demands, and endings grounded in truth echo longer than promises ever could. As you walk away, you might wonder if he'll ever understand what you offered. But understanding isn't the point. Awakening rarely announces itself. It moves in shadows and memories, in late-night reflections and unspoken regrets. Maybe one day he'll sit in the same silence that once scared him and finally hear what you were trying to say without words. That love is not possession. That devotion is not self-erasure. That freedom, not control, is the real intimacy the soul seeks. And maybe in that moment, he'll whisper your name not to call you back, but to thank the echo for what it taught him. There is a moment in every story of love and loss when the noise begins to fade. The endless questions, the restless need to know why, the ache that used to pulse in the chest like a wound slowly. It all softens. You stop rehearsing what you could have said differently. You stop scanning the horizon for closure. Instead, a quiet awareness starts to take root that perhaps this was never about winning or losing someone's heart, but about coming home to your own. In the early days, that awareness feels cruel. You don't want wisdom, you want what was taken. You crave the warmth of what once was, even if you know it wasn't meant to last. But over time, you start to see that every relationship leaves behind an imprint, a kind of psychic fingerprint that shapes how you see yourself. The ones that hurt the most are often the ones that show us where we were still asleep. You begin to realize that this connection, the one that burned so bright it left you scorched, was not meant to sustain you, it was meant to awaken you. Carl Jung believed that what we fall in love with in another is the reflection of something we have yet to integrate in ourselves. When he spoke of the anima and animus, he wasn't describing gender so much as the inner union of opposites, the dance between our rational and our intuitive, our strength and our softness, our control and our surrender. When a man meets a woman who embodies the aspects of his own soul that he has long ignored, he doesn't simply find her beautiful, he finds her haunting. She embodies his unlived life, his intuition, his capacity for vulnerability, for mystery, for surrender, and for a moment, through her, he meets himself. But self-recognition is not always comfortable. It's disorienting to realize that what draws you most deeply toward another person is not their affection, but the echo of your own forgotten truth. So he oscillates longing for her, fearing her, idealizing her, resenting her. She becomes both sanctuary and storm. And when she finally walks away, her absence reverberates through him like a bell that refuses to stop ringing. For her, the experience is equally transformative. To be someone's mirror is both sacred and devastating. You sense the shift in him before he does. You feel the pull and the retreat, the tenderness and the fear. Part of you wants to hold him through it to help him cross that invisible threshold. But another part of you knows that if you try, you'll lose yourself. You'll begin to twist your own light just to keep him from turning away. So instead, you choose the harder path. You let go. You trust that what's meant to transform will do so in its own time. That's the paradox of conscious love. The more awake you are, the less you can cling. You begin to see that love is not ownership, it's reflection. It's the meeting of two souls who illuminate each other's depths, even if only for a brief and breathtaking moment. And once that light has been seen, it can never be unseen. The heart expands, even through its breaking. Sometimes he realizes it years later. Maybe while sitting in a cafe, he hears a song you once loved and something inside him shifts, not nostalgia recognition. He realizes that the feeling he's been chasing through new faces was never about you. It was about the part of himself that woke up in your presence. He'll close his eyes, remembering how calm you looked when you finally walked away, not cold, not bitter, just certain. That image, that silence, becomes the first step in his own awakening. And if you've ever been that woman, you'll know the weight of that silence. You'll know how hard it is to walk away with dignity when the world tells you that to love means to fight, to beg, to prove. But there is a different kind of power in choosing stillness over struggle. It's the quiet declaration of a soul that refuses to barter its peace for belonging. When you choose yourself in that way, you don't lose love, you become it. There's something alchemical in that transformation. When you no longer chase validation, when you no longer shrink to fit, your energy changes. It becomes clear, radiant, magnetic. You stop seeking to be chosen, and instead, you become a mirror for others to see their own truth. You awaken something ancient and wild in the world around you. The paradox is that this is the very energy that men and people in general find irresistible. Not the striving, not the pleasing, but the quiet certainty of someone who knows they are already whole. In that space, love no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like a mirror held up to the soul. And in its reflection, you no longer see who left or who stayed. You see yourself, luminous and whole, finally understanding that what you were seeking through another's eyes was waiting all along within your own. There comes a point when the story no longer feels like a loss, but like a return. You wake up one morning, sunlight spilling quietly across the sheets, and realize the air has shifted. The heaviness that used to sit in your chest has softened into something gentler, a kind of gratitude that surprises you. You think of him, perhaps not with longing, but with understanding. His name no longer burns on your tongue. It hums quietly in the background of your memory, like the echo of a song that once carried you across a dark night. And for the first time, you can look back without wanting to change a single thing. Because what you once thought broke you was, in truth, what brought you home. When Jung spoke of individuation, he described it as the process by which a person becomes whole by confronting the unconscious, by facing the fragments of the self that were once hidden or denied. What few realize is that love, especially love that doesn't last, is often the spark that sets this process in motion. The end of a relationship is not just an emotional rupture. It is a symbolic death. The identity that once fit you, lover, nurturer, savior, the one who was chosen, suddenly disintegrates. You are left standing in the ashes of what you used to be, stripped bare of illusion. And in that sacred emptiness, you meet yourself for the first time. It's strange how clarity often arrives in silence. There are no grand revelations, no heavenly choirs, just an unspoken knowing that the point of love was never to possess another, but to awaken the unlived parts within. You see now that every tear, every unanswered message, every sleepless night was a form of initiation. You weren't being punished, you were being refined. The pain carved space inside you so that something new could take root: compassion, depth, self-respect. You realize that love, at its highest frequency, doesn't promise forever, it promises transformation. And somewhere out there, perhaps in another quiet morning of his own, he begins to feel it too. The distractions no longer satisfy him. The new faces blur together. The laughter that once felt like victory now rings hollow. Because the truth is, he's not missing you. He's missing what he felt when he was with you, the sudden access to his own depth, his tenderness, the softness he'd long buried under control. You were never meant to be his forever. You were meant to be his mirror, and mirrors, by their nature, disappear when we turn toward the light they reveal. Still, something inside him changes, slowly, quietly. The resistance that once defined him begins to crumble. He starts to ask questions he never dared to before. Why did I need to be admired? Why did I confuse control with strength? Why did her freedom scare me so much he might never speak these words aloud? But they live in him now. The seed has been planted. It grows in silence, like all important things. You, too, are changing. You stop apologizing for your power. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into fragile hearts. The same silence that once felt unbearable becomes sacred to you now. It's no longer the silence of abandonment, it's the silence of self-possession. You fill it with your own voice, your own laughter, your own presence. You realize that being alone and being lonely are not the same. Loneliness is the ache of needing someone to complete you. Solitude is the calm of realizing you were never incomplete. Over time, the ache transforms into wisdom. You see love everywhere now, not as romance, but as connection. The way the sky blushes before rain, the way strangers hold doors open for one another, the way your heart still beats despite everything it has endured. You see that love isn't something you chase, it's something you become. The very thing you once begged someone else to recognize has always lived inside you, waiting to be claimed. And then, one day, maybe in a quiet bookstore or a city street you've walked 100 times, you catch someone's gaze. It's not electric, not cinematic, just simple and steady. And you smile, not because you're ready to fall again, but because you finally understand love doesn't begin with another person. It begins with the courage to remain open after you've been broken, to trust that the heart, like the moon, will wax again even after it wanes. You no longer need to prove your worth through someone else's eyes. You no longer need to be unforgettable to be enough. You simply are. And that, at last, is the quiet revolution. At some point, the story stops being about two people at all. It becomes about something larger, the invisible thread that runs through every soul who has ever loved, lost, and learned to begin again. You start to realize that the man who couldn't stay, the woman who walked away, the ache that split you open, all of it was part of a greater design, something the heart knows long before the mind can catch up. Love was never meant to be tidy or fair. It was meant to reveal, to burn through illusion until all that remains is what cannot be destroyed, the truth of who you are. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he described it as everything we refuse to see in ourselves, the fears, the desires, the vulnerabilities we exile to the unconscious. Yet, paradoxically, it's through love that the shadow comes alive. The person who captivates us often embodies what we've denied: our longing for tenderness, our capacity for surrender, our hunger for meaning. We project those hidden pieces onto them and call it destiny. But destiny, in this sense, is not about union, it's about awakening. It's about being confronted by the parts of ourselves we have neglected, until we can no longer look away. He didn't love you because you were flawless. He loved you because, through you, he saw a part of himself he had forgotten how to touch. And you didn't love him because he was perfect. You loved him because he made you remember how deeply you could feel. It was never about who either of you were on the surface. It was about what you each represented in the other's inner world, the map back to the self. There's a kind of sacred cruelty in that design. Because when the lesson has been absorbed, when the mirror has done its work, the form often dissolves. The relationship ends, and we mistake that ending for failure. But endings are not the opposite of love. They are its completion. They are how love transforms from possession into wisdom. And it's only after the storm has passed that you begin to see what it was trying to give you all along. You learn that peace doesn't come from holding on, but from understanding. You start to sense that every person you've ever loved still lives inside you, not as ghosts, but as fragments of your own evolution. The man who left taught you strength. The one who stayed too long taught you boundaries. The one who never chose you taught you how to choose yourself. And through them all, you keep evolving, becoming a more complete version of the woman who first stepped into love hoping to be seen. There's beauty in that realization, bittersweet, quiet, humbling. You begin to see that the love story wasn't a detour. It was the road itself. Every conversation, every silence, every moment of ache and wonder was a thread leading you closer to your own wholeness. Love didn't fail you. It formed you. And somewhere, far beyond your knowing, he begins to change too. Maybe he doesn't reach out, maybe he never will, but in small, unseen ways, the connection you once shared continues to work inside him. He listens more deeply now. He feels more than he did before. The armor he once wore so tightly has begun to crack. Perhaps one day, he will meet someone new and love her differently, more openly, more honestly, less afraid. And though he may not realize it, the reason he can do that is because of you. You were the bridge, the catalyst, the beginning of his return to himself. It's strange how grace works. We often think healing comes with grand gestures, with apologies, reunions, or new beginnings, but most healing happens quietly. It happens in late-night thoughts, in moments of surrender, in the stillness after tears. You start to realize that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the story's grip on your identity. It means honoring what it gave you and letting it rest. You begin to live differently now. You no longer chase intensity for the sake of feeling alive. You seek resonance, instead relationships that breathe, that flow, that expand without consuming. You speak with more gentleness, love with more patience, and you stop confusing drama with depth. You realize that true intimacy is not fireworks, it's safety. It's two souls unafraid of silence, unafraid to be real. And when you look back on the woman you once were, the one who cried, who doubted, who begged the universe for answers, you don't judge her anymore. You thank her because she stayed open even when it hurt. She believed in love even after it burned her. She didn't harden, she transformed. This is how love ripens through time. It strips us bare, then gives us back to ourselves. It teaches us that endings are not the death of meaning, but its rebirth. What remains is something quieter, more enduring, something that no longer needs validation to feel real. It's the love that arises when all illusions have fallen away, the love that simply is. And so, after all the unraveling, the distance, the silence, the questions that once looped endlessly, you arrive at something you never expected. Peace. It doesn't arrive with a burst of light or an apology that finally makes sense. It arrives quietly, like dawn after a long night. You sit with your own reflection, perhaps with a cup of tea gone cold beside you, and realize you no longer ache for what was lost. Instead, you feel something softer, steadier. A deep exhale that says, I made it through. I became who I was meant to be. You understand now that love is not meant to rescue us. It's meant to reveal us. The ones who enter our lives are not random. They are messengers. carriers of the lessons our souls are ready to learn, and sometimes their role is not to stay, but to awaken. The man who once adored you, who later pulled away, did not leave because you were too much or not enough. He left because something in you touched a part of him that wasn't ready to live in the open yet. And though you could not save him from himself, you unknowingly handed him a mirror, the first glimpse of his own potential to feel deeply, to change, to become whole. What he gave you in return was the invitation to remember your worth beyond being chosen. He taught you to see that love's true power lies not in possession, but in presence. That the woman who can stand in her truth, unshaken by rejection, is not unlovable, she is free. And freedom, when it is embodied, shines brighter than any promise ever could. As time passes, you begin to see the invisible symmetry of it all. His journey and yours were never separate. They were parallel reflections of the same calling to wake up. For him, that awakening might take years. For you, it may already be unfolding. But the thread that connects you, the lesson of authenticity, of self-ownership, of love without fear, remains alive, humming softly beneath the surface of time. That is the mysterious grace of archetypal love. It never really ends. It simply changes form. You might catch yourself wondering sometimes if he thinks of you, if he ever understood what you represented. And though you'll never truly know, a part of you senses the answer yes. Maybe not in words, maybe not in conscious thought, but in the quiet way his soul remembers. The echo of your energy, the calm certainty with which you walked away, became part of his inner world. And that echo will stay, guiding him long after the story is faded. Because the mirror that first showed us our soul is never truly forgotten. For you, life begins again in a softer way. You start to create without needing an audience. You move through your days with a grounded kind of grace. The storms that once terrified you now feel like weather unpleasant, but passing. You've learned to trust your own rhythm. You've learned that solitude isn't an absence of love, but the space where real love takes root. And when it returns, as it always does, it will not come to complete you, but to walk beside you. This is the paradox Jung understood so deeply, that wholeness is born not from attachment, but from integration. Once you claim the parts of yourself you used to project the gentleness, the strength, the vulnerability, the power, you no longer search for them outside. You become the union you were always seeking. You become, in essence, both the lover and the beloved. And when love finds you again, it will feel different. It will not arrive like a storm, but like spring, patient, renewing, tender. You will recognize it not by its urgency, but by its peace. It will not ask you to shrink, nor will it demand you to prove. It will stand before you like a clear mirror, reflecting everything you've become and everything you're still becoming. You'll meet that gaze without fear, because this time, you will not lose yourself to love, you will expand within it. That, perhaps, is the quiet miracle of it all, the realization that every heartbreak was, in truth, a threshold. Every ending was a disguised beginning. Every person who walked away was a teacher leading you back to your own soul. You no longer resent the ones who couldn't stay. You thank them silently, because they brought you here to this still point where love is no longer something to chase, but something you are. And if you are listening to this now, perhaps this is the message your heart has been waiting for. You were never forgotten. You were never too much. You were never unworthy of love. You were the awakening, the turning point, the reminder that what's real doesn't beg to be kept. It simply continues to exist in its purest form, even after goodbye. So let this be your peace. Let this be your understanding. Love, at its deepest, is not the story of two people. It is the story of the soul learning to remember itself through another's eyes. And when the lesson is complete, there is no bitterness left, only gratitude, only light, only the gentle truth that what was once broken has now become whole. If this reflection touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs tonight. And if you'd like more journeys like this, stories that remind you to live, to feel, to awaken, remember to like, share, and subscribe.